Okay, everybody, this is my review of The Handmaid's Tale Season 5, Episode 9, Allegiance. This was written by Eric Tuchman and directed by Commander Lawrence himself, Bradley Whitford. This is the first episode he has directed in the show. Now I'm going to split this review into two parts. We'll talk everything going on first with June and Commander Lawrence, and then we'll finish off with the Serena storyline. So we start off with June and Luke with Mark Tuello, and they are now going to watch this air raid happen that we're all tensely waiting to see what's going to happen with it. And we meet Commander Vance, who's going to be the lead soldier on this mission. The point is that we meet he has a daughter himself, and he's like, my plan is to bring your daughter home and go home to mine, he says to June. This will be a tragic ending for him, and this will come full circle by the end, which I appreciate. I like that at the end of this episode, June will be with his daughter Emma and protect her. We have this mysterious shooting happen, which we're going to get to. But before we go to the raid, the story flips to Lawrence, and Lawrence needs a wife. Now, this is still a thing happening from the beginning of the season. It was originally almost going to be Serena, and now the idea is for him to propose in the most awkward proposal ever to Naomi Putnam. And it's great because Lydia says to Naomi, you can't be a widow with a child and continue to live in your own house. And that's when Naomi's like, oh yeah, it's much too grand for us. Speaking of the house, maybe a nice condo. And she's still alluding to, no, like, you need a husband. And that's when Lawrence awkwardly is like, you can move in here with the kid if you want. And it's security for her, like he says, and it's basically for him to save face. And that's when Naomi's like, this is a marriage proposal? And he's like, yep, what do you say? And she's like, I have a choice? And he just says, that's hurtful. I love that line. Again, in past seasons, I wasn't thinking that Commander Lawrence was that funny, but his lines this season have been crushing it. So whoever's writing the jokes for him, props. But this is where the conflict's going to come, because Lydia says to Naomi, consider his stature in doing this. And she says he had Warren killed in front of me. Now, this is where Lydia says, which is something he's willing to overlook, and you should too. But we see that behind the door is Lawrence, and he looks terrified here. And to me, what they're setting up is this isn't going to go as smooth as that Lawrence would want it to with Naomi, and that this is a problem because she's not seeming fully on board with this. Because again, she still was married to this guy, how evil he was. There is an awkwardness and a weirdness to just marrying someone who just had your husband killed and the father of your child. And Lawrence looks terrified to me because she could do anything at this point. How can he just fully trust that she's going to go along with this? And that's shown at the end, later on in the episode, when he puts his hand on her shoulder and she is not feeling it. So I'm curious where they're going to go with that, but it's very interesting. So we now see June and Luke in this like CTU center here, watching this air raid about to happen on the screen. And we get a little glimpse, though, it cuts to, of Hannah in her wives' school. And remember, Hannah, we know, went to art school in Gilead, so that's why she also has a drawing there. But what's interesting, she, of course, has a picture book with no words. And she definitely can write a little. She writes her own name on the picture. We don't know how much she can actually write in general, though, or read. I thought that was interesting. And we see they're in these little tents for the wives' school. But there's this immense, very effective tension built here, thinking this air raid's about to happen, but it becomes a complete failure, and we see that on the screen. This is also the way to save a lot of money on budget and just show it, the planes disappearing on the screen, than actually showing the planes. But Gilead anticipated the mission. They took all 3 planes down, no survivors of these planes. So this is where it gets really interesting to me, because Lawrence then calls June, still pleading for her to come to New Bethlehem. And he even says, Hannah's a symbol, you're a symbol, whether you like it or not. After last night, it would be great for people to see June Osborne return to Gilead to be close with her child. And then he goes, you'll be close to Nick too, to kind of sweeten the pot. And he also says, I need you to do one thing as well. Go public and call the failed mission a foolish act of aggression, which is like insane. And I totally agree with Junior. She's like, I cannot make Gilead look like the victim here. She's never going to do that. And she leans into Lawrence here, which is deservingly so, because she's like, you are one of them, and it's even worse because you know better. Because he's been turning a blind eye to a lot of things recently, even though he knows it's happening. And this is where Lawrence is like, Eleanor would still want me to help you with Hannah. And she's like, I want her here, safe and free. And he says, never going to happen. But what's important, Lawrence has a tear there. So there is that humanity in Lawrence still there. But he knows, how can this ever really happen? And he feels remorseful for how this is going with June. And that's when she says, then go F yourself. And this was my favorite acting of Elisabeth Moss this season. Really brings it here, and I love her shaking during this. I really was blown away by her performance in this episode in particular. And then she just takes it out on those poor bushes. Now, it's also interesting. I like to do a lot of callbacks to earlier in the season and wrapping up some stuff that was set up and giving us more answers. Like June and Mark talking, and Mark informs June how Nick turned down his offer to be a spy for the Americans, and then he would give Nick immunity in Canada. So to June, it's like, this is crazy. Why would he turn that down? That sounds exactly what you'd want to do. But that's where Mark's like, maybe you can persuade him. And we see this little argument going down between Nick and June at first when they meet each other. It's one of those, you should have said yes to Lawrence, and she's like, you should have said yes to Mark. And this is result of Gilead, right? The world they're in. And it's this thing where they both have families. They both love each other. And it's just almost impossible to have a simple solution to this. And what makes things really complicated, and is complicated with Nick, is that he is married to Rose, because Rose happens to be a person who has a powerful father in Gilead. So it's very, very complicated. And I'm still wondering at the end of the day what Nick's endgame is. Yes, he's putting his eggs in the basket of Lawrence, and that they're making Gilead better, and that's how he justifies what he's doing. But it's still a head scratcher that he would even risk marrying Rose, because yes, it brings him up a tier because of how powerful her father is, but how do you get out of that? Especially if you get attached to Rose and have a kid with her. But I love the writing here. She's like, I wish the world would just go away just for a little bit. And then he says, tell Nicole I love her and I miss her. And that's when Nick sneaks in the I love you, and she says I love you. I mean, the chemistry between these two since day one is unmatched. And it's one of those things, it's like this love that can just never happen, but really should be the love, because again, you see June and Nick together, it's so much better than June and Luke together by miles. It's just electric. But she says children look to their fathers, set an example, and June smiles. So again, it's not this simple thing where he can just pack Rose to go move to Canada. Maybe if Rose didn't have such connections to Gilead with her father, it'd be a different story, but that's not the case here. So they're both in this kind of mess, but they both care about each other's families, which I like. And I really am starting to wonder if there's one character that would move on to the Testaments and be a big player, it might be Nick. We'll see, though. So we see Rose has this little baby celebration, and there is a nasty wife there who's like, I thought there was no aunts allowed, talking about Aunt Lydia. And then she even mentions chance for genetic issues with the baby. It's like, who invited the Karen here? Oh, and then we see who I totally forgot about, Commander Mackenzie now, aka Ozark. And he's putting pressure on Lawrence and Nick about June, which I really, really liked. And what I love about this and how it was so brilliantly set up this episode is that Lawrence and Nick have their plan in the day to make Gilead a better place, but they're really getting pushed now, the pressure of like, you can't have your cake and eat it too, in the meaning like you're either against June or with June. And I like that it adds for more conflict and suspense and really putting their neck on the line and what they're really going to do and choose. And I think this really sets up the season 6 final season conflict. That's where I think it will lie with Commander Mackenzie and Lawrence and Nick, and how they're going to handle when it comes to decisions with their own families, their own lives, their own goals, and how to protect June. So we see now the memorial for these soldiers who died, and there's those vile Canadians right on cue, and we see these shots are fired, so you wonder who this is, but they're shooting the American flag. That's going to be interesting. So this whole story with June and Lawrence, I loved. I thought this was really, really good, and at way higher quality than the whole rest of the season of Handmaid's Tale. This is the stuff I like. No eye rolling. I am more on the edge of my seat, and it's spinning the script into more interesting conflicts and, okay, what can happen with this, and seeming a little more fresh now, which I like. Now let's go to everything with Serena. So Miss Wheeler is doing a photo shoot of Serena and Noah here, and it's a photo she wants to put at the entrance because they're getting ready for the opening of the fertility center. But this sets up Serena's motivation for this episode, again going to like, I should be there, I should be the one greeting people with my baby. This was my idea. And it also shows Miss Wheeler wants Serena to just keep on pumping, and Serena's like, I just want to nurse and not confuse the baby. And she's like, oh, my smart boy won't get confused. And Serena really has to hold her tongue here. And I love that she has to keep doing this throughout the episode, and probably has June in her head during this, which I love. And it's funny, too, how they got a great shot here of Serena and Mrs. Wheeler, and it's the same exact shot you'd always see with Serena and June. But it's really funny and ironic because Serena's still the towering figure, but she's a submissive one here. So it comes off pretty humorous, which I love. So then in the middle of the night, Serena, like Commander Wiley even says, butters him up. The Serena thing to do. But Serena, again, this was set up earlier in the season. She brings up to him, the fertility center was my idea. I should be there as a symbol recruit woman, and she's right. Like, strategically, it's a smart thing to do. And he's like, nice pitch, I'll consider it. So it's funny how Mr. Wheeler is just the more passive character than Mrs. Wheeler, where she's the more aggressive and really wanting to torment Serena, where this guy's just off, but he's not as aggressive. And Miss Wheeler the next day slaps her twice, does this in front of the maid, and is like, stay away from my husband, and calls her a whore. So then we actually see the opening of the fertility center, and Miss Wheeler's like, okay, Serena, time to go. And Serena is like, well, I need to nurse Noah. And this again brings up the issue where Miss Wheeler's like, you should use a bottle. And she's like, well, I didn't bring a bottle. And the maid covers for Serena. I'm really worried about this maid now. I hope she makes the next episode. I have a feeling they're setting up a tragic death for her here, especially because the maid was the one going with Serena, and we see Serena boogies with Noah here and leaves. So rest in peace, maid. I'm saying it already. Miss Wheeler's gonna freak out, and you see Serena gets a ride from Blue Hair here. But again, exciting turn of events, and I'm really now fascinated to see where this goes. It's getting me more hyped about the show and excited. And I really want to say I am very, very impressed with Bradley Whitford's directing in this episode. The amount of tension he built up, everything had a purpose each scene. It wasn't this slower pace we're used to. I was very intrigued by it. He knew how to use the camera really well, and I am very excited, and I want him to do more. So I'm giving this one a 9. It's the first 9, thank God, I've given of the season. I've been waiting to give a 9 for this show. I was afraid we're going to have a whole season where I didn't give a 9. This is a 9 on the nose for me. Very impressed by this penultimate episode. I'm excited for the finale next week, which is going to be written by the creator and showrunner himself, Bruce Miller, and directed by Elisabeth Moss again. So we'll see how that turns out. And I also want to let you guys know I will be doing, after my finale review comes out, I'll be doing, of course, a live stream like I did last year, where you guys will get to sound off and I'll listen and we can debate about this whole season of Handmaid's Tale as a whole. So keep an eye out for that as well. That is coming, I promise. Please let me know your thoughts down below about this episode. And please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for more of me. And I'll see you next time.